My journey began when I was about 7 years old, when my dad gave me my very first FM tuner. And I was like, whoa, what is this? And it was a cool one with the silver front and all awesome. And I found a radio station on there, 106.3 KKLI, which was Continuous Soft Favorites. Very popular music for a 7-year-old boy to be listening to. A lot of Celine Dion and Elton John and weird stuff, but I loved it. And my mom used to take me down to the radio station to get bumper stickers. And I remember I would send out song shout outs to my babysitter when she would come over, and I would call the night girl and she'd play Return to Pooh Corner. And I thought it was so cool that she'd play me back on the air. And I was like, 8 years old at the time. So that was kind of the beginning of that. And I remember when I was 10, I called the station and was like begging them for a job. I was like, can I just sweep the floors or something? And they were like, well, it's not really a thing. Plus you're 10, so we're not really going to do that either. Then I became an angsty teenager, didn't really think about what I wanted to do for a long time. And then once I got into high school, I was like, I think junior or senior year, I was like, okay, I got to figure something out, which I always liked video production. I always thought media was cool, like TV. Like when I was a little kid, when my sister and I would set up and make fake newscasts in front of the using our video camera and stuff. I enrolled at the community college my senior year of high school and took classes on video production. And right away I was like, oh, I get this. Like this stuff makes a lot of sense to me. So I was like, okay, let's go down that path. Still wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do, but I ended up going to Colorado State University, Pueblo, in Pueblo, Colorado, and enrolled in the mass communications department there. And I started, as part of the TV program, you also had to take classes in radio too. So I took a introduction to radio class, and our first project was really like station imaging. Like we had this old like multi-track recorder. This was before Adobe Audition or Cool Edit or any of that stuff. And we had to like arm our track, record it, press play, put the CD in. It was all tedious, but I was like, this is kind of cool. And the professor wrote on my grade sheet saying, hey, you should see me. You could have a career doing this. And so I go into his office and he's like, you ever thought about working in radio? And I'm like, nah, not really. And he's like, well, let's put you on the college radio station. Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. And the college radio station was, let's just say I grew up in a part of Colorado Springs where I thought rap was the thong song. That's how much I knew about rap. And the college radio station was like hardcore hip hop and R&B. Like I have never even listened to Tupac, and now I'm playing him on the air and I'm trying to talk about it, and I sounded horrible. But I started really liking it, and I was like, this is kind of cool. So I just kept doing it and doing it. And I did TV and radio kind of concurrently throughout college because I was like, okay, well, that'll, double my chances of getting a job in one of those once I graduate. So I really liked both TV and radio. And because I'm very, like, I like being the star or the talent, but I also really like the techie stuff, like the technical aspect of broadcasting in general. So then I interned at Clear Channel in Colorado Springs in 2004, right after my senior year of college. And my very first job was driving the station vehicle out to put up the bat light for KCCY 96.9 at the Ron White concert at the Pikes Peak Center in Colorado Springs. That was my only job. And then I proceeded to experience the fun of being an intern, which involved washing the vans, cleaning out the prize closet, calling winners. And I went back to college for my junior year and still did both TV and radio. And just lived and breathed this stuff. Like I lived on campus. I became the student station manager. The summer after my junior year, I actually interned at a TV station at KOAA TV in Colorado Springs and Pueblo. It was in Pueblo, but it serves both markets. And I got to be the morning camera guy there. And what was cool was interns really weren't supposed to do anything. But I ended up... one of the guys, I think, called in sick that morning and they didn't have a backup. So they basically just threw me on a camera and I did it, without any issues. And they were like, oh, okay, well, now you know what you're doing. So after you graduate, give us a call and we'll talk. So then I went back to school for my senior year and just, learned as much as I possibly could to wrap everything up. And I just loved the book stuff about broadcasting. Like we had an FCC law class that I just loved. I mean, everyone else hated it because they were like, this is boring. Like, why do we have to learn about the offices of the FCC? And I'm like, this is cool. So I set the curve in the class at like 99.5%. So the class hated me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like the whole class just hated me. But then I was like, senior year, I was like, you know what? how about I offer study sessions and help you guys do well as, too. So I made up like mock tests and all of these different things to get people to really learn the material. So I graduated and no radio jobs called. So I figured, okay, well, let's call the TV station. Well, they hired me 2 days after graduation for $7.85 an hour. The shift started at 4 a.m. and went to noon, but you got a 2-hour lunch break in the middle so that it wasn't full time.
Of course.
Yes, of course. But I would like run the morning news. I would get the anchors their scripts. I would run the prompter. I would edit videotape. They hadn't switched over to nonlinear editing yet. And I was like, this is kind of cool too. So I did that for, I think like two months, but I really wanted to work in radio and nobody was calling me. And I'm like, what is the deal? Like I'm sending out tape after tape after tape. I ended up, actually, I did get a call back from this for this promotions assistant job at Clear Channel in Pueblo. And it was right down the street from the TV station. And I went there, interviewed. They passed on me for somebody else, which sucked. But then one morning I was talking to the news anchor at the TV station and I was telling her, hey, I really wish I could get back into radio or do something in radio. And she goes, oh, I'm friends with the operations guy at Clear Channel here in town. So she called him the next day. The guy calls me. His name was Nick Donovan, really great guy. And he's all, hey, so yeah, we hired a promotions assistant, but we'd like to hire another one because you came highly recommended by Georgianne Liberopoulos. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I go in there and right away, I was working with the 3 promotions directors and they were, one of their first things they told me was always bring a pad and paper to every meeting. And I never forget it. I still think of it to this day when I grab my pad and paper to go to a meeting. I'm like, yep, Charnel and all those guys told me to do that. So within a couple months, I was they ended up parting ways with the other guy and they just kept me. So I started working the state fair remotes, no on-air work, but just like promotions. Same thing I'd done as an intern, but I was getting paid for it now. I think I was making $9 an hour part-time. And so I would literally, but I was still working at the TV station too. So I would work from 4 a.m. to noon at the TV station. Then I would drive down the street, literally on the same street, and work from 1 to 6 as a promotions assistant every day. I was like, I still really want to be on the air. And, it was Pueblo, it was market 253. They had like 1 live jock at the time. Then one day, my dad, totally random, tells me that his coworker's neighbor is Bobby Irwin, the operations manager of Citadel Broadcasting in Colorado Springs. And my dad's like, is that someone you'd want to talk to? I'm like, yeah, like I would very much like to speak with this gentleman. So I told my dad and he talked to his coworker who then talked to Bobby. And the next day Bobby calls me and I'm like, oh, hey. And he goes, hey, so I got your stuff. How would you like to start on Oldies 92.9 this weekend?
Wait, how old again?
22. Yeah. So the aspiring broadcaster in me is like, yes. But the 22-year-old in me is like, ugh, oldies. But, you got to pay your dues. So at this point, I'm like, yes, I'll do it. Then he goes, okay, well, you should probably give Clear Channel, a heads up because it's technically a competing market, even though they were nearby. And it sucked because Clear Channel had just bought me all this custom station gear because I'm 6'8". So they bought me all of these custom logoed apparel items. And I'm like, hey guys, I'm going to be putting in my notice. And I think at first I said 2 weeks and they were like, well, when's your first shift? And I'm like, this weekend. They go, let's just call it today. But they understood. They were really cool. I started on the air on 92.9 KSPZ Saturday night. And I was like, okay. And I was playing really old stuff that I was like, I don't remember. Even my parents didn't listen to this. Like it was just so very 70s, maybe a little bit of early 80s in there. And then a week later, the station flips formats to a hot AC when it became 92.9 Peak FM. And suddenly they basically rebranded the whole station to where it was a little more, it was just a cooler radio station. Like it was a little more contemporary. They still had some of the 80s and 70s and 90s in there, but they also played like Colby Calais and Sarah Bareilles. And it was more of a fit. It was still a little older than I should have been on. I was the youngest on the station by far. But they put me on there. So then suddenly, I'm doing 7 to midnight on every Saturday night on Peak FM. And I thought I was on fire. And then I learned how to do traffic reporting. So then suddenly, because keep in mind, I was still working at the TV station too. So I was commuting from Pueblo to Colorado Springs on very little sleep for months on end. And then finally I got enough hours there to where I could leave the TV station and move up to Colorado Springs, move back in with my parents at 22. They were all happy I was back too. And so from there, I was like, I just need to learn everything and just learn everything. I got on the country station, again, because somebody called in sick and they were like, we need a DJ. Hey, Dan, have you ever done country? Let's have you try it. You actually sound pretty good. Let's have you do it again. And then I became Dan the Tall Man on the country station. Had never worked country or even listened to country in my life. But it was fun, so I got on there and then, started learning, kind of the operations side, production. I'd fill in for the production director, making commercials and doing voice stuff and all that. And then finally on October 31st, 2007, I got my very first full-time contract, for $24,000 a year. To me, that was a lot back then, especially I was brand new. And I'm like, I'm working for Citadel Broadcasting. This is the same company that Howard Stern once worked for. So it was basically, I was doing nights on the AC station on 92.9 at the peak. And I was doing afternoon traffic. So the shift was like 3 to 11, 3 to midnight really. But, I would kind of bend it here and there. And within 3 months, the morning guy resigns to go take another job. And he was also the promotions director. So Bobby Irwin, the operations manager, comes to me and says, hey, Dan, how would you like to not do traffic anymore and be the promotions director and the night guy? I'm like, I don't know anything about promotions. He's like, well, you're going to learn. So I did that for a little while, for about 8 months. And then the August of 2008 happened and we had a big layoff. Company-wide, really industry-wide. They laid a lot of people off and they eliminated the program director of the news talk station in our cluster. Well, being the techie guy I am, news talk is really a pretty technical intensive programming job because you're dealing with different clocks, with satellites, with sporting events, a lot of different, moving parts technically. So they came to me and said, we'd like you to be the APD for the news talk station. I'm like, okay, so I'm the APD of the news talk station. I'm the night guy on the AC station. I'm the promotions director for the AC station. And I occasionally fill in on traffic sometimes. Plus, I'm producing remotes. I'm talent on remotes at this point, and it was great. So I really dive into the whole news talk deal. I ended up driving Sean Hannity around when he came to town with you. I drove the vehicle that he was in, and you drove the vehicle that all of his luggage was in.
And producers.
Yeah, and we drove him to a big rally that the station was throwing, and all of this, and then we took him to his private jet, and it was like, oh, this is pretty crazy.
We had to rent out Escalades.
Hey, we did have to rent out Escalades, yes, because he endorsed GM, so we had to make sure it was all on par. Then things really started to tighten up with Citadel. We started, really crunching down on air shifts. I started having to, jump around multiple stations and, pick up some extra jobs. And while this is happening, I'm also learning how to DJ weddings. So I'm like, because keep in mind, I was making $24,000 a year. That ain't going to cut it. So I had to learn this other trade to do on the weekends, because DJing a wedding, if you work in radio, it's just like doing a show. You're just you're in person. So it's actually really easy for anybody working in radio or any kind of public event setting to just kind of transition into weddings, because you already know the music, you know how to be present on the mic, you know how to read people. March of 2011, and I'm like, we win a CBA award. So we go up to Denver to go to the broadcasting awards for the Colorado Broadcasters Association. And, all these people from Denver are there, like the big personalities, the TV anchors, and they play back all the submissions whenever they'd win. And I'm hearing these and I'm like, well, they're not bad, but they're not like amazingly better than what I'm doing down here in Colorado Springs. I wonder if I could work in Denver. And so after that, I was like, you know what, let's apply. And through a mutual colleague, the production director job was open at Mix 100, Cool 105, and 92.5 The Wolf. And I sent I sent the demo, and I wanted to be a jock, but I was like, I'm production director. That could get me in the door. I get a message back from Greg Cassidy, who is the operations manager, who actually signed on Alice 105.9 in 1994, like big name in radio. And he goes, hey, I like your stuff. Could you send me a spec spot for a cupcake company? And I'm like, sure, I guess I could do that. Well, I didn't own any sound effects libraries or anything at the time. So I basically had to create this creative commercial for a cupcake company, using real effects. So I had you come over to my apartment and you'd make like, you make like sounds in the kitchen of things rattling around and all this. And we created this spot that I sent to him and he goes, this is good stuff. Want to come up for an interview. So I drive to Denver, and keep in mind, this was right when Cumulus had acquired Citadel. And there was a lot of unknowns in the business of, what's going to happen once they take control? Am I going to even have a job? You just didn't know. So this was kind of I'd been there 5 years. So I was like, I think it's time to go. So I go to Denver and met with the GM, met with, the OM and a few other people there, and they offered me the job. And I took it. So then I moved to Denver literally a month after I had gotten the idea to move to Denver. April 11th, 2011 was first day on in Denver. And from there, I just started making a lot of contacts. I got on the air on the country station, so I was doing nights. It wasn't much, but, it was just kind of get me known in Denver, started meeting a lot of people, working the salespeople, learning about the big market. I did that job for 2 years. Cause it was I didn't really want to be a production director. I wanted to be the talent, because production director, you're kind of at the whim of the sales department, and that can be a little rough sometimes. Especially if you're wanting to be more the talent. So I left there and then went over to KYGO and did my country thing for a little while. Just did part-time. There wasn't really anything full-time open, just staying on the air. I remember in Howard Stern's Private Parts, every time he got fired or something, he's like, I just got to stay on the air. And that's what you got to do. You just have to stay on somehow until the next opportunity comes along. I started working actually at Westwood One part-time as well, doing their 24/7 format. So, I was on the air in Presque Isle, Maine, and Great Bend, Kansas, and, things like that. But it was really easy. It was easy. It paid well. It was $15 an hour, which at the time was pretty decent. And then, so I just did a lot of part-time, did weddings for a bit. And then finally Westwood One came to me. They had just been acquired by Cumulus as well. And they said, hey, we have an opening on the Audacy afternoon show for you full time. So I'm like, cool, let's do it. And that job was cake. Like that job, I did that job for about a year. And it was, you read liners for little stations, and you just, they had access to show prep, and you really just put on a fun show. You couldn't use phones or any of that stuff because it was all national, and it had to be very generic. But it was actually for a tech guy like me, it was really easy to do, and just kind of figure out, okay, this is how we're going to make this work. And then Cumulus, before the Dickies departed, they came up with the idea of slashing all of the 24/7 format DJs. They thought they didn't really understand what we did. They thought basically we were just voice trackers, but it was actually more like localized custom tracks for local stations to sound local. And they came up with the idea that they were like, well, let's just have all of our other DJs and all of our other markets do that. And get rid of these people in Denver and Dallas and Valencia, California, and eliminate 3 million from the salaries or something. So I was part of that layoff. A lot of people, when you get laid off, you cry, you get upset. What I did as soon as I knew, my first call was back to my friend Eddie Haskell at KYGO saying, hey man, I just got let go. Can I come back part-time? Yep, come on back. So I literally just went from, getting laid off to starting back on the air on the country station like a week later, just to stay on there. And they offered me part-time at Westwood One, but I was like, no, thank you. But, I want to get back into local radio anyways. So it just wasn't for me. And there's still, great people there. It was a weird, and then the Dickies got let go from Cumulus like a week after that happened. So I get to Bonneville, which had just acquired KYGO, and Cozy 101. And the afternoon guy, they had to part ways with him because he was still an Intercom employee. And when Intercom and Bonneville merged, he had to go back to Intercom. And so there was an opening on afternoons on Cozy. Again, the AC station, lots of Celine Dion and Peter Cetera. And at this point, I'm like 31, still a little soft. It was like the soft rock station, yacht rock. And so I'm like, you know what? A job's a job. So I start doing it. And I, applied for the job and kind of auditioned for it. And they ended up hiring somebody else, a market vet who had been there at the station before and was more of a name in the market. So I was like, okay, well, that happens. And then at the next CBA Awards in 2016, that you and I were also at, I'm, just hanging out, networking with people, chatting. And afterwards we go to the bar, and I meet a woman named Sam Hill, who is the program director of KQMT at Intercom across the street. And she was also the music director on Alice 105.9. Like, fast forward a couple weeks, I get a text from one of my friends who works at Intercom in the traffic department. And she's all, hey, Dan, they're hiring, there's a job posting for an on-air announcer full-time at Intercom Denver. And I'm like, that's always up there. They just leave that up there for EEO stuff. And she goes, no, this is a new one. I'm like, okay, doesn't say what station. But I'm like, I'll apply. Why not? I send my stuff. And then I messaged everyone I knew at Intercom on Facebook. I didn't really know that many people there at that point. So I just messaged everyone I was friends with, even if I had met them or not, being like, hey, if you know who's hiring for this job, put it in a good word. And Sam Hill replied saying, hi, Dan, I'll be doing the interviewing for this. I'm like, she calls me in for an interview, and I find out it's for the afternoon show on the classic rock station. Again, I'm 32 years old, and this station is playing Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Neil Young, and just really, good music, but older music. Like, this was definitely like a 60 plus radio station, like, on its surface. I'm like, well, I don't really know much about this stuff. And I'm listening. She's like, well, go listen to the station and tell us what you think. So I listen to the station, and it's all like market vets who have been in the market forever, who have like lived and breathed Jimi Hendrix and Jethro Tull, and they knew everything about these artists. And I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to compete with these guys? So I listened to the station like nonstop, even in my sleep, and kind of learned the cadence of how they would deliver stories. And, with the internet, you can find anything, stories about anybody, and, piece it together and make it sound like you're the one telling the story. And so I ended up making an air check with the station's imaging included that I'd ripped off of a receiver, and basically was like, this is what I'm going to sound like if I'm on your radio station. And I even played it for my dad. I'm like, hey, does this interest you? Does this stuff interest you? And he's like, nah, I don't really care about what the album cover was for The Police in 1981, but I do care about this, So I'm like, okay, well, let's change up the content. And so then I burned it to one of those CDRs that looks like a vinyl record. And I even made like a little liner note that even said like unauthorized duplication, will be prosecuted and all this stuff, and just said Dan Hardee air check. And I put it into a bag, and I knew, because at the CBAs I had met Sam Hill, I knew that she was a Jameson drinker. So I took 2 shots of Jameson, put it in this bag, and I was friends with the receptionist. The receptionist hand delivered it to her, and inside the bag it said, how about we have these shots after you give me a shot? One interview turned into 1, 2, 3, and then all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, I'm really being considered for this job. Like, I'm meeting the GM and the OM and the consultant, and I'm like, whoa. And then they offered me the gig. And I was replacing a guy who had been in Denver for 40 years on the air. This guy was a legend. I was just like, what if these people hate me? Like, and he had a huge fan base, and people grew up listening to him. And I'm like, what if, and this kid, I'm like, what? That's the thing. It's like, what is that, imposter syndrome, when you feel like you're not good enough to do the job? Of course I got that. There were times when I'm just like, how am I going to do this? Like, I got the job. Now I actually have to perform. Like, this is nuts. But I did it. So I started learning the format, started learning everything, started getting to know people around the building. And then I only did the afternoon show. That was all I did. And then in 2019, they eliminated the program director position and made our OM the PD. But he didn't know much about classic rock. So he asked me to kind of be the guy that learned how to do music. And so our consultant, Alex Demers, one of the best guys to ever work with in the consultancy world, he taught me Music Master, and then taught me how to, put all these, this is why this song goes next to this song. This is how you code this song. It's a science, it's programming. And so I learned that. And then COVID hit. And then at that point, it was like, we are real short staffed now. My boss, the OM, Mike Peterson, he got promoted to the vice president of talent development for Intercom. And they were like, okay, well, if you're going to do that, you can't be in charge of programming all these radio stations. So you're going to have to, find a guy for this. So he tells me, he's like, yeah, he's like, I'm going to pitch you to be the program director for the Mountain. And I'm like, whoa, this is cool. Like, and I was supposed to become APD, but they just skipped right over APD and went right to PD. So I'm like, well, this is cool. So then in January of 2021, they officially named me, 22. They officially named me as the brand manager for KQMT FM in Denver. And like, this is cool. And so I got to manage people. And I've always wanted to be the manager that I wanted to work for. Someone who's respectful, someone who can get his employees to want to work well for him, not because they're scared to, because they want to. They want to impress their boss. They want to get good feedback from their boss. And so at that point, it was really just me and our morning guy. And then middays and nights were syndicated through different voice trackers. And so I'm managing this, this small team, but they were all pros. I didn't really have to hold anybody's hand. They knew what they were doing. I think it was August of 2022. I reach out to my format captain and I'm like, hey man, I've been voice tracking afternoons on WCMF for quite some time. What if I become PD of that station? Because I know that's kind of where this, where the industry's going is you can you can program multiple stations, and two, you can program them remotely. Like if you do it right and learn the market that you're programming to, you can program a radio station out of market and be successful. And I'd already been on the air in Rochester for a year doing afternoons, just voice tracking, talking about local stuff happening. I've never been there, but we just started doing that. And then, so I reach out to my format captain. He goes, well, we have somebody else for that. However, there's another station in the Rochester cluster, 98.9 The Buzz, that we'd like to consider you for. I'm like, oh, okay. So I listen to this station. It's like a kind of a pop 80s radio station. Great staffers. The morning guy had been there in the market for 35 years or something, very established morning show. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. So I agree. And then I don't hear anything for 3 or 4 months. And then they're like, we want to offer you this job. So then suddenly I become the regional brand manager for Audacy, taking over WBZA in Rochester. Still never been there, but now I get to work with this other staff out there, helping to coach the morning show, helping to coach the midday show, just listening to the jocks and trying to just tighten things up. It was a great radio station, but every radio station can be tightened up a little bit and kind of have some maintenance done on it. And you put your own little personal touch. So of course, right away, I was like, I don't think the voice guy fits. So I changed the voice guy. In the process of getting new jingles now, redid imaging and all this stuff. So really put my own little touch on this radio station. My personality kind of thrives on this stuff. I'm so technical, but I'm also, I love to do the on air and kind of the on site stuff to where I'm kind of like a one man radio station almost. And I have other personalities on throughout the day and I really enjoy it. And I actually, it was fun. I got a text from somebody I've been working with that they had said that, they felt like they had improved more than they had in years after working with me. And I was like, that's cool to feel as a manager, when it's just volunteered and they just tell you that and you're like, yes, because that's fun. I want people to want to work for me. I don't want people to hate working for me.
And since being in management, what are some things that you have done to make that happen? Or what are some things you've discovered along the way to be like, oh, this worked?
One of the things I've learned is sitting down and making a jock listen to an air check while you're listening with them. It's just not, I don't like that style. There's some people that like that. I just don't think that's productive because I feel like it's putting them on the spot. It's putting them on the defense before you've even done anything. Give them critique on the show and then maybe send them the audio to listen to on their own. Be like, hey, this is what I heard. Try this. This sounded good. Maybe try doing this. And then they can hear that on the audio when they listen back to it. Now, obviously, that requires a jock who's willing to get better, and micromanaging, this is not a business for micromanagers. Everyone in this business, we're all busy. We all want to succeed. But all of us have, different personalities. Some of us are more fragile than others. Some people end up getting out of the business because they have a boss that just crushes them with things. And that really shouldn't be how it is. You just don't micromanage people. Assume people are going to do a good job until they don't. And that's the thing. Just if you hire a person, assume they're going to do the job. Great. And then if they don't, then you work up things. But there's ways to do that. It's all about, you want to always try to keep the positivity going, the positive perception. Everyone knows this business is hard. It's very thankless. A lot of people don't make much money, but it's fun. And so keep it fun. Because if you take away the fun out of radio, no one's going to want to work for a job that's not fun and they don't make any money. They'll work at a job that's not fun if they're getting paid $50 an hour, but they're not going to stick around for that kind of stuff. Radio doesn't have the luster that it had before. It's still very cool, but it's not one of those jobs that people are going to put up with a lot of nonsense to stay in, especially millennials. They're going to be like, really? You're going to treat me like crap and pay me nothing? I'm out of here. I'm going to go work at Best Buy and probably make more money. radio's a cool business, but it's not a cool enough business to where you can just use slave labor employees to get it done. You've got to take care of your employees. And even if it's not in monetary value, take care of them with perks, with concert tickets. Obviously, concert tickets don't pay the rent, but it's something. Give them a day off. Give them a comp day. Take them out to lunch. Take them out to dinner. Just show that you are there, because that's the thing. A lot of employees feel left and disconnected. And if you just make a little extra effort to show that you are there, you're here for them, that's going to go a long way.
How do you do that remotely?
And so every week I have a Zoom call with my morning show. But I also, text them throughout the week. And they text me, we'll email. I'm always, I probably message or text them once a day, at least once a day with something, whether it's, hey guys, we got this new promotions coming up. We got this going on. You don't want to ever let them feel like they're on your back burner, especially when you're managing remotely, because that's really easy to forget about. And they could be scared. They may think, well, Dan's in Denver, so his Denver station's going to get the priority of his attention and not us. You got to change that perception. You got to make sure they're kind of loved too. And with the midday and afternoon hosts, I chat with them maybe twice a month. We'll have a Zoom meeting just to catch up. They're both really professional, so they kind of know what to do, and most of it can be done in an email. And I'm not one of those people that wants to do a meeting or catch up just to do it. But we do text enough to where, and you develop a kind of a friendship with these people too, where you can, you see a funny radio meme and you can send it to them and they'll be like, oh, okay, because you want to bring that guard down. Again, it's all that whole, I want to be good because Dan is my boss. I want Dan to give me positive feedback. It's almost like a proud parent. And obviously that's different with every show, with every manager, with every type of strategy when it comes to, delivering on-air content. But for the most part, they seem to really like everything. And then does it pay off in the ratings? That's obviously, that's the biggest benefit you want. But, at the end of the day, does your radio station sound good? Does the morning show sound good? Are they fun? Are they friendly? If they are, the ratings will eventually come. And, are they wasting people's time? Are they, could they do this bit in 2 minutes instead of 3 minutes? Things like that. Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes it's yes. And you really have to keep an open mind, and you can't ever be like, the second you say, we're doing this because I'm the boss and I told you to, you have failed as a manager. If you ever have to remind your staff that you're the boss, you need to resign. Because you have failed as a manager, because the second you pull that card, whatever respect they did have for you is now gone. And you have to always, you're all on a team. And I don't consider myself their boss. I'm in the talent management business. My job is to give them the tools to do the best shows they can possibly do, and to give them the feedback to make their shows better, to make them better, so that we all win with ratings and revenue in the end. If I can give any advice to someone getting into management, or even someone who's already in management, maybe is just looking to be a better manager, is you're not the boss. You are the talent coach. You're the talent manager. Your job is to make your staff as good as they can be, and to give them the tools they need to be as good as they can be, and to give them the resources and the shoulder to cry on, and sometimes just to listen to them, because most radio people we're all a little weird. Like, this is the biggest collection of misfits in an entire industry. And your job is to really be there for them and empower them. You're going to want to elevate them, find the people that you're like, wow, that could be a rising star, or that guy really seems to get in audio engineering well, or something like that. Elevate those people, because you never know, down the road, you could be looking for, to them for a job. And if they're learning from you, it just kind of, you pay it forward. And it comes all the way back around. So I would say never get the mindset that you are a king, or any kind of, that you're not a dictator of the station or the staff, because you're really all the same. You're just the one with the keys to the car, and everyone else is riding in the car with you. So really think of it like that. You're not riding in the front while everyone else is in the back. You're all riding in the car together. So make sure you can all get to your destination successfully. Be a very good multitasker. Be able to do music on this one station and then switch over to record an endorsement, then do music on a different station, then switch over here to update this promo or something like that. Like, you've got to be really good at just like changing gears really fast. And it takes some practice, but you've also got to be organized. You don't want to be that PD that just, people are like, yeah, I emailed him and he never emails back. You don't want to do that. No, if you respond to people right away, they will be impressed. Most people will be impressed. I can't tell you how many times I'll get the, wow, thanks for the quick reply. And all it was like, okay, sounds good. You're going to drop the ball. You're going to make mistakes. The biggest way I look at it is, at the end of the day, did anybody die? We laugh, but it's true. This is not, when we have a bad day in radio, nobody dies. The station keeps on chugging, and you're going to make mistakes. You're going to say the wrong thing at a sales meeting that the salespeople are going to hear as something else, and then you'll get torched. Learn from it. I've done it. You learn sometimes what to say, what not to say. But that all comes from experience. Nobody can teach you that. You can give basic, guides to make that work. But I've been doing this business in October. It'll be 20 years. And I'm still learning every day of how it works. So, and I'm, my goal is to ride this train as long as I can. I love my job. I absolutely love the people I work with, all of my managers. Audacy has treated me really well. I just want to keep doing this and just keep, growing and growing. And who knows, there could be another position that opens up. But I think at this point too, to kind of close with that, another thing is, don't be the radio person that just jumps around the country. Unless you're making for lateral moves, unless they're big moves. Like if you're going from APD to PD to SVP or things like that. And at the same time, invest in your company. Some of these guys who are at the top of iHeart and Audacy, some of these guys have been with the companies for a long time, and they just worked their way up. And if you're investing in one company, all the same players. As you continue to move up, you'll know all those people will be the same, and you'll be able to work with them, and just keep growing, and then at the very end of your career, maybe you retire to a small market station and you're the one guy that's there. That honestly be kind of my dream, is to just move to Buena Vista, Colorado, and just run a radio station that you're the only guy there, and, you don't make that much money, but you're retired. So it's like, it's just fun at that point. But as long as you're still in the regular radio game, just keep on pushing, because, I think we're coming to a point now where a lot of people are going to be retiring, and there's going to be a whole new wave of people moving up that are going to be moving into some of these high positions. And do you want to be the one that's not quite ready, or do you want to be the one that is like, here's my resume, here's my demo, I'm your guy?